I moved to Eldridge a few months ago. I wanted to document the town's lost history. The quiet streets and old buildings held stories begging to be told. One chilly evening, I decided to visit the library. The wooden beams creaked as I walked in, and the musty smell enveloped me. I always felt a bit cold in there, but it felt like home for an aspiring historian. I plopped down at a table covered in papers. My curiosity piqued. I discovered an old journal. The cover was worn, and I could barely make out the name. Flipping through the pages, I noticed the handwriting was messy. My heart raced as I read about a child's language. The words were strange, yet they seemed to tug at something deep inside me. That S when I heard its soft laughter, echoing through the library. I glanced around. No one was there. I shook my head, trying to brush it off as my imagination. But as I kept reading, the words blurred and danced on the page. I couldn't focus. Days went by, and I couldn't stop thinking about that journal. I noticed some pages were missing. It unnerved me. I remembered the laughter and convinced myself it was nothing significant. But the whispers haunted me. At times, as I walked through town, I felt eyes on me. The townsfolk watched, but they never approached. Their stares felt heavy and wrong. Still, I pressed on, eager to uncover buried truths. I spent many late nights reading, hoping to understand the child and their fate. Something told me this strangely familiar language might reveal answers. Answers that Eldridge wanted to keep hidden. One evening, I finished reading a particularly strange passage. As I closed the journal, the laughter filled the air again, louder this time. My heart thumped hard in my chest. I shot up from the table, chair scraping loudly against the floor. The library felt emptier, as if shadows were multiplying in the corners. That I was scared. But I couldn't turn back now. I had to know more about the child. I needed answers. That S when I heard a whisper, he must not learn. I turned, panic bubbling up inside me. I saw no one. My breath quickened, an icy grip of fear settling in my stomach. I clutched the journal tighter, and the lights flickered above me. The air chilled, sending shivers down my spine. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling something important was about to happen. Then the laughter returned, echoing in my ears. But this time it morphed into a cry. I froze in place, confusion and terror washing over me. What was it trying to tell me? I stepped back, heart racing. I could feel the shadows closing in with every ounce of fear. I stumbled out of the library. I knew I had uncovered something that wasn't meant to be found. As I reached the door, the laughter faded, but the weight of the words lingered. I knew I was not finished. I couldn't shake the feeling that Eldridge held dark secrets, and I couldn't stop searching for the truth. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I hadn't slept well, haunted by the whispers and laughter. My dreams were filled with shadows and echoes. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but the journal called to me, its secrets tangled in my mind. After breakfast, I decided to visit the library again. It felt wrong to be so drawn back to that place, but curiosity nudged me forward. The air was crisp as I stepped outside, and I felt the weight of the town's silence pressing down. The streets seemed even quieter than before, as if Eldridge was holding its breath. When I arrived, I hesitated at the door. The library loomed ominously. I remembered the flickering lights and the icy air from the night before. Still, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The familiar musty scent greeted me. My heart raced as I looked around. I didn't see anyone, yet the unease followed me that I found a seat at the same table. The journal lay against my chest, and I opened it carefully. This time I wanted to dig deeper into the missing pages. The child from the journal intrigued me but unnerved me as well. Each word felt like a key, and I was determined to unlock whatever door it led to. As I read, I discovered names mentioned alongside strange symbols I couldn't decipher. Something about them felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. Then, as I turned the brittle pages, I noticed something odd. A torn edge highlighted the space where the missing pages had been, and faint stains marked the margins, maybe tears. Suddenly, the laughter echoed again, sharper and more urgent. I froze, glancing around the empty room. I couldn't tell if it was real or just in my head. The shadows cast by the afternoon sun seemed to shift closer, tightening around me. Anxiety prickled at my skin. I wanted to leave, but part of me refused to back down. When I spotted a scrap of paper sticking out from under the table. I leaned down and pulled it free. The handwriting was hurried and frantic. "He knows more than we thought," it read, "and the town won't forgive if he discovers the truth." My hands trembled. Who had written this? What did they know? Someone wanted to keep a secret safe, and it felt like I was getting closer. The whispers I had heard before grew louder, blending with a sense of urgency. I had to confront whoever or whatever was trying to protect the town's secrets. I took a deep breath, adrenaline coursing through me. Just then, I noticed a figure standing in the corner, partially obscured by shadows. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. They were watching me intently. My heart sank. Then everything went dark. The lights flickered once more, plunging me into shadows. The figure was gone, but the sense of dread remained heavy in the air. I felt trapped, cornered by forces I couldn't see. All at once, the laughter exploded into a wail. Piercing the darkness, I stumbled back, knocking over the chair as I rushed to the door. I had to escape. I didn't just have questions anymore. I had become part of something I didn't understand. The town of Eldridge was losing its secrets, and I was right in the middle of it all. I burst through the library doors and gasped for air. The sudden sunlight felt blinding after being enveloped in the shadows. My heart raced, and I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady myself. I was outside, but the dread clung to me like a second skin. What had I seen? Was it real? The figure, the laughter. It all felt too vivid, too alive. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting in the corners of Eldridge, hiding just out of sight. I looked around, half expecting someone to leap out at me. The street was empty. My mind flashed to the journal. The boy. His words. I couldn't focus on it all. I took a few shaky steps forward, scanning the area. My instincts told me to leave town, to go anywhere that felt safe. But the ache of curiosity tugged me back. Whatever was going on in Eldridge, I needed to know more. With a reluctant breath, I decided to seek out the town historian, Mrs. Carrington. She had lived here forever and knew the town's darkest, oldest tales. Perhaps she could shed light on the symbols and names in the journal. I hurried down the street, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The steps to her Victorian house creaked beneath me. I knocked, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread wash over me. After a moment, the door swung open, revealing Mrs. Carrington. Her silver hair framed a weathered face, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Darling, what brings you here today?" she asked, her voice smooth but wary. I hesitated, unsure how to explain the weight on my shoulders. "I found something in the library. It's about the town." I showed her the scrap of paper and the journal. A flicker of recognition crossed her face as she examined the writing. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her tone shifting. "In the library," I admitted, anxiety creeping back. There was a figure, and then the lights went out. Mrs. Carrington's expression hardened. "You shouldn't look too deeply into the town's history, dear. Keeps its secrets for a reason." She motioned me inside, shutting the door softly behind us. I swallowed hard. "But I can't let go. There's something about a boy." "And stop," she interrupted, her voice low. "You're not safe here. There are things in Eldridge that shouldn't be disturbed." I opened my mouth to argue, but she raised a finger. "Trust me. I know what you've uncovered, and it's dangerous." My thoughts raced. What did she know? And who was that figure? I felt the walls closing in again. "Mrs. Carrington, I need to know more," I insisted. The urgency rose within me. She sighed, shifting her gaze to the window as if she could see something beyond it. "Perhaps I should show you something." My heart quickened. As she led me deeper into her house, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay ahead would either reveal the town's buried truths or pull me further into something unimaginable. But now I was committed. Then, just as we reached a heavy door at the end of the hallway, I heard it again, the laughter. This time it was different, echoing from somewhere deep inside the house. It raised the hair on my arms. The moment froze. I turned to Mrs. Carrington, desperate for answers. What was that? She opened the door, revealing darkness behind it, and I took a step toward the unknown. The darkness swallowed the hallway, pulling me into its depth. I hesitated, my gut churning with doubt, but Mrs. Carrington's steady hand urged me forward. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice a mere whisper against the heavy silence as we crossed the threshold. A chill enveloped me, sending shivers down my spine. The room was small, cluttered with dusty shelves and tables that appeared to bend under the weight of forgotten artifacts. Old photographs hung crookedly on the walls, their subjects staring into the void. A low murmur echoed, making me glance back at Mrs. Carrington. "Here," she gestured to a table in the center. "This is what I wanted you to see." It was a collection of objects: a faded locket, a tarnished key, and several pages filled with strange symbols. My heart raced as I recognized some of the writing from the journal. "What is this?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "A remnant of the past," she replied, her eyes glinting with a mixture of reverence and fear. "These belong to a boy who lived in Eldridge long ago. He had a gift or a curse, depending on how you look at it." I leaned in closer, examining the symbols, some looping and intricate, others jagged and sharp. He spoke in a language no one understood. It was said he could summon things from the dark. The townsfolk, they didn't take kindly to it. Did they hurt him? My voice trembled as I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. I wanted to turn away from this cruel fate, but I was already tethered by a force I couldn't name. Mrs. Carrington shook her head slowly. They feared him, but it was his own curiosity that led to his demise. The last place he was seen was in this very house. A door suddenly creaked open behind me, and I spun around, heart pounding. The laughter returned, sharper and closer this time. I felt an invisible pull, dragging me toward the sound. I stepped back, colliding with Mrs. Carrington, who gripped my arm tightly. "Stay close," she whispered urgently. "We shouldn't be here." But my feet felt glued to the ground. What happened to him? I pressed, my thoughts on the boy, on Eldridge, on the secrets still waiting to be unearthed. Mrs. Carrington's eyes narrowed. He paid a price for his knowledge. The last thing he became was a memory. Just then, a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the single lantern flickering on the table. Darkness engulfed us, and the laughter morphed into a frantic, piercing sound that vibrated through the walls. I stumbled backward, disoriented. Panic surged as I reached for the door, but it slammed shut of its own accord. "What is happening?" I yelled, fear gripping me hard. "Whatever you do, don't look for him," Mrs. Carrington shouted above the chaos. "You must leave now." But as I turned to find another way out, something caught my eye. There, etched onto the back of the door, was a pattern I recognized, the symbols from the journal. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just looking at history. I was staring into the abyss of something far darker. And just like that, the laughter stopped. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, not from the shadows, but from the depths of the very walls that held Eldridge's secrets tight. I could either turn back now, or step further into the darkness. The air was thick with tension, and the dark seemed to close in on me. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced at Mrs. Carrington, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. I knew I had to move, but every instinct urged me to stay put, to decipher the secrets that lay before me. "Which way?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The room had transformed from a mere artifact-filled space to a claustrophobic prison, the darkness festering with urgency. "Back. We need to." Before she could finish, the walls shuddered, and a low rumble echoed around us. It was as if the house itself was alive, reacting to our presence. I felt a tingle run down my spine. The laughter returned, now mingled with a soft voice murmuring syllables I couldn't understand. It wrapped around me like a serpent, squeezing tighter as fear began to claw at my throat. That I turned back to the door. Felt like my only escape. But something shifted behind me. The dusty table rattled, and the objects on it began to vibrate softly in tune with the whispering voice. The locket slid closer to the edge, dangling as if it would plunge into the abyss below. "Don't touch anything," Mrs. Carrington shouted, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. "I need to know," I said, as dread washed over me. I stepped closer, reaching out despite the warning. The second my fingers grazed the locket, a jolt ran through me. Images, vivid and frantic, flashed behind my eyes. A boy standing in the same spot, chanting those strange words, his face twisted with desperation. With a gasp, I yanked my hand back. The room warped around me. I saw flashes of his world, a time when Eldridge was alive and buzzing, yet dark. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, remnants of a past overlapping with my own. "What did you see?" Mrs. Carrington's voice broke through the chaos. "I don't know." He was scared, but there was power in his fear. I turned to her, desperation creeping into my voice. "We need to find out what happened." She shook her head, her expression filled with urgency. "No, we can't get involved with whatever this is. It knows we're here." As if in response, the door behind me rattled violently. An unseen force pressed against it, pushing and pulling like something desperate to break free. My breath caught in my throat. What if it wants us? That's exactly it. If it's tied to the boy's fate, it could want to trap us here too, she said, her voice trembling. And then, the murmurs crescendoed into a cacophony. I could almost make out words. Just as I leaned in closer, the door burst open, slamming into the wall. I barely had time to react before a wave of cold air swept through the room, tugging at my clothes and drawing me toward the threshold. "Run!" Mrs. Carrington yelled, but something stopped me again. A flash of darkness coiled around the doorway, looming like a ravenous beast, and at the center, the outline of the boy emerged. I found myself rooted to the spot. I understood his fear, his longing. But before I could comprehend the choice I had to make, I heard the whispers reach a fevered pitch. They screamed, not just at me but for me. Just then, as the boy's figure flickered, I realized he was trying to warn us. But warn us about what? The shadows surged forward, and my heart thundered. I turned and dove through the open door, but Mrs. Carrington's grip was strong, pulling me back. "We can't leave him," I begged. In that moment, I saw the key reflected in her terrified eyes. I didn't know what it unlocked, but something told me the answers lay just beyond the door. With one last glance at the darkness behind us, I felt a decision settle in my gut. I was stepping beyond the threshold, a choice woven deep into Eldridge's memory. And that when I heard a voice, called to me from the shadows. "Help us." Suddenly, I was more afraid than ever. What had I just awakened? I stumbled through the door, Mrs. Carrington's grip still iron on my arm. The chill from the dark room hit me hard as we emerged into the hallway. My mind raced with questions. What had we just witnessed? Why did that boy look so familiar? "Keep moving," she urged, pulling me along. Her urgency matched my own rising fear, and we rushed down the dimly lit corridor that I glanced back, half expecting the shadow to follow us. The laughter faded, but the echoes filled my ears. "What was that?" I asked, breath coming in quick gasps. "I don't know, but whatever it was, it feels alive," she said, an edge of panic creeping into her voice. "We have to get out of this house now." I nodded, pushing my fear aside as we rounded a corner. The light was dimming the further we went. I could feel a strange pull from within the walls, like they were beckoning us back. "We can't leave without understanding what happened in there," I protested. "No," she snapped, her expression fierce. "We can't afford to mistake curiosity for bravery. That boy, he's trapped, and it's not our fight." I shook my head, defiant. "But we can't turn our backs on him," I shouted, the words escaping before I could think. My pulse raced, and suddenly I felt the weight of the moment. What if we're the only ones who can help him? Mrs. Carrington stopped, her eyes narrowing. "Help? Do you think we have the power to change anything? We're intruders here." Just then, the air shifted. A current of energy pulsed through the corridor, and a low hum vibrated against my skin. I felt that strange connection again, something lingering just outside my perception. What if we could figure out why the house is like this? What if the locket holds the key? Before she could respond, a loud thud echoed behind us. The door we'd just come through slammed shut, isolating us in the already dimly lit hall. My heart dropped. What was that? I whispered. Mrs. Carrington stared at the door, her breath quickening. We're not alone. As if answering her conclusion, a sharp whisper cut through the silence. Seek the truth, it urged, down the stifling hallway. The sound was a beckoning, a call I couldn't ignore. Did you hear that? I asked, adrenaline racing through me. Mrs. Carrington stepped hesitantly, but then jerked back, her eyes wide. This is a mistake. We need to leave. But I felt drawn to the voice. I took a hesitant step forward. What if it's warning us, or guiding us to answers? That's exactly what it wants. She hissed, panic evident on her face. We're treading on dangerous ground. I hesitated, weighing the fear against the urge to find answers. A distant shadow flickered at the end of the hallway, just beyond the flickering lights. I could almost make out a figure. Who's there? I called out, my voice trembling. No response came, but the air thickened, pressing against me. And in that moment, I made up my mind. We have to find out what it wants, I said, moving deeper into the shadowy hall. But as I took my step forward, the temperature dropped further. Something dark and amorphous surged at the edges of my vision. I paused, heart racing again. I suddenly felt like I was being watched, a gaze heavy with intensity. Then everything went dark. When the darkness swallowed me, I felt the world shift around me. The silence became a deafening roar. I reached out, my hands seeking stability, but all I found was the cold, unyielding wall. Panic started to rise. Mrs. Carrington? I called out, my voice wavering. There was no response. I felt truly alone in this heavy blackness. I held my breath, listening for her footsteps or any sign that I wasn't about to vanish into nothing. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the darkness lifted. I blinked rapidly as a faint light pierced through. I found myself standing in a room that felt eerily familiar, yet wrong. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, the furniture draped in white sheets. It looked like a memory I had never lived. The air felt charged, thick with something unnameable. As I stepped forward, I noticed a small table in the corner, an ornate box sitting atop it. Without thinking, I walked over and cautiously lifted the lid. Inside was a locket, much like the one Mrs. Carrington had mentioned. The urge to touch it was overwhelming that I reached in but halted, feeling an electric jolt as my fingers brushed the cool metal. Images flashed in my mind. The boy with haunted eyes, the unsettling laughter, and a hint of something amiss lurking in the depths of the house. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, a mix of dread and curiosity. What was this locket? Could it really hold the answers we needed? Just then, the soft sound of laughter drifted through the air, cutting through the eeriness. It was unmistakable and echoed around me. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Mrs. Carrington? I whispered again, but my voice trembled. Panic crept in again as I felt the presence of something nearby, pressing against me. Seek the truth. The voice echoed again, this time louder, more insistent. The truth of who had spoken it began to take shape in my mind, as if the words were leading me somewhere in a moment of clarity. I realized this house had witnessed countless moments, the laughter of children, the cries of despair, perhaps even the boy's last words. The air felt suddenly charged with his lost energy. I needed to understand. I turned my gaze back to the locket. It felt like a charm powerful enough to open doors both literally and metaphorically. But before I could act on that thought, I sensed movement behind me. I spun around, breath catching in my throat. There, in the doorway, stood a silhouette. The figure was small, barely more than a shadow. It was the boy from before. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and a shiver ran down my spine. Then, in a voice that was both thin and hollow, he spoke. Help me. That single plea pulled at something deep inside me, igniting a fire of urgency. I took a step forward. "What do you need?" I asked, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The boy looked toward the locket, his gaze piercing through the darkness. "You have the key. Don't let it slip away." Before I could respond, the room began to tremble. The walls shook, and the laughter escalated into frantic screams. I could feel the pressure building, a storm of energy ready to break free. "Get out!" A voice thundered from all around as the room flickered like a dying candle. Instinct kicked in. I grabbed the locket tight and ran toward the door, ready to plunge deeper into this twisted mystery. I couldn't abandon him now. But as I reached for the handle, I noticed something crawling along the walls, a dark shape that twisted and coiled. And I realized with dread I was not the only one seeking the truth. Then everything went dark again. A sudden, jarring light exploded around me, causing me to squint. I was back in the room, but it was different now. The laughter had vanished, leaving an unsettling silence. My heart raced as I scanned the corners for the boy, but he was gone. The locket, still clasped in my hand, felt heavier. I took a step forward, the floor creaking beneath my weight. Shadows flickered in the corners of the room, taunting me. I could almost hear whispers that seemed to ebb and flow, teasing the edges of my thoughts. "What do you want?" I shouted, the emptiness swallowing my words. An eerie stillness filled the room following my outburst. Then, out of nowhere, a breeze swept through, sending the white sheets billowing like ghosts. The table shook slightly, causing the locket to jingle softly. A small note fell from the edge and fluttered to the floor. I hesitated but finally crept forward. The candlelight wavered as I bent down to pick it up. The note was aged and worn, the ink faded but legible. It read, "He speaks of the past. Listen closely to what he says. The pattern holds the key." Was this a clue about the boy? I felt a wave of determination swelling inside me. I had to find him, to understand what he meant by the past. That connection was vital. Just then, I heard a soft thud from somewhere deep within the house. I turned toward the sound, feeling the locket pulse against my palm. The pulse was rapid, as if it was alive. I glanced back to the door and then to the window. The shadows outside crept closer. Instinct took over. I had to move. Holding the locket tightly, I walked toward the source of the sound. My heart pounded in my chest, each step echoing like a drum. The house felt alive, whispering secrets and forcing me to confront something I couldn't yet understand. As I reached the door at the end of the hall, my hand shook as I gripped the cold handle. I turned it slowly, the creaks sounding like silent screams. The room beyond was dim, and the air prickled with anticipation. When I saw it. At the far end stood a mirror, cracked and dusty. It reflected not just the room but a vision of the boy, tears streaming down his face. "What happened to you?" I whispered, feeling a sense of helplessness wash over me. But the boy directly looked at me through the glass, mouthing words that I couldn't hear. I needed to get closer. Maybe I could finally understand. As I stepped forward, the mirror shimmered, rippling like water. I reached out, my fingers brushing the surface. A surge of energy flowed through me, tightening my grip on the locket as images swirled in the mirror. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, and the room shifted. Panic surged again as the chilling darkness poured in, blocking my escape. "Find the truth." The boy's voice echoed through the chaos. But before I could process his words, the mirror's surface exploded with images. I was thrust into a vision of the past, and I wasn't alone anymore. The world around me blurred and twisted as the images in the mirror engulfed me. I felt weightless, as if I was being pulled through time itself. Then, just as suddenly, I was standing in an unfamiliar place, a small, sunlit clearing surrounded by dense trees. I was no longer in the dim room. Instead, I found myself in what looked like a wooded area, where sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The air vibrated with laughter, children's voices echoing cheerfully in the distance. Panic rushed through me. Was this the past? Was this where the boy had lived? I turned, and there he was, but it wasn't the tear-streaked face I had seen in the mirror. He stood bright-eyed and full of life. A group of children gathered around him, captivated by something he was showing them. They smiled and laughed, lost in the moment. I felt a strange sense of longing as I watched. Instinctively, I stepped closer, trying to hear what he was saying. The boy spoke animatedly, but his words were strangely distorted, the sounds tangled and unfamiliar. It was as if he was speaking an entirely different language, one that had never reached my ears. The other children chimed in, their laughter rising as they echoed his strange phrases. "What are you saying?" I murmured. My voice felt foreign here. It was as if the woods swallowed my words. I wanted to join them, to understand. It was maddening to be so close yet so far from grasping the truth. Suddenly, a shadow crossed over the clearing, and the laughter faded. The children turned and dashed deeper into the forest, panic in their faces. The boy hesitated, glancing back, his eyes wide with uncertainty. In that moment, I felt a rush of fear. I knew something was coming, something dark that would disrupt their joy. "Run!" I wanted to shout, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, I stumbled back, the vision spinning into chaos. My heart raced again, and I realized I was slipping out of their world. The murky darkness crept back, swallowing the laughter, and dragging me away from the boy. Just before the scene vanished completely, I caught a glimpse of something, the boy's hand reaching out toward me, the crystalline locket glinting in the sun. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, I was pulled back into the cold, echoing room where I started gasping for air. I flinched as the door creaked open on its own, revealing a shadowy figure standing in the way. The room was now colder than before, and the faint light from the hallway barely pierced the gloom. I couldn't see the figure's face, but one thought hammered in my mind. I wasn't alone anymore. "What do you want?" I croaked, my voice shaky. The locket grew heavier in my hand, urging me to remember what I'd just witnessed. I had seen him, the boy from the past, but what did his words mean? Why was he reaching out? There were pieces of a larger puzzle here, a truth I was desperate to uncover. But whatever the figure was, it moved closer, and I felt the air grow heavier, tension wrapping around me like a vice. I was running out of time. I took a step back, anxiety coiling in my gut as the figure loomed in the doorway, shrouded in darkness. The weight of the locket in my hand seemed to steady me, but uncertainty hung like a fog in the thick air. "Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. The figure didn't respond but shifted slightly, merging further with the shadows until it was almost indistinguishable from the darkness around it. But then, in a voice that echoed with a hint of familiarity, it spoke. "Not all truths are meant to be discovered." A chill ran down my spine. Was this the spirit of the boy? Or perhaps another entity trying to protect its secrets? My heart raced as I clutched the locket tighter. What had I unearthed in this relentless pursuit of knowledge? Before I could respond, the room quaked again, rattling the very foundation as if the house was warning me. The whispers returned, low and urgent. "Help us. Help us." The voices surged into a frenzy, mixing with the laughter that faded from my dreams into desperate cries. "Enough!" I shouted into the darkness, fighting to pierce through the confusion enveloping me. "What do you want from me?" "The boy needs my help." The air seemed to still, every sound swallowed by an aching silence. Then the figure stepped forward, revealing its face partially a visage of a child, eyes glimmering with a knowing look. "He is lost," it said softly, yet the weight behind those words was palpable. "You have the key, but you must choose wisely." The shadows behind it pulsed, dark and swirling like a storm within a cosmos of despair. A deep instinct urged me to move closer, to unravel the secrets woven into the very fabric of Eldridge. Still, doubt gnawed at my resolve. The boy's hand reaching for me flashed in my mind, a lifeline across the bondage of time and tragedy. Without thinking, I lifted the locket into the flickering light of the hallway. "I need to understand," I said, my voice steadier. "If I can just connect with him one more time, maybe I can." "Don't." The figure interrupted, its voice rising with urgency. "You cannot heal what was broken. The truth may bind you to this place forever." My pulse quickened, each heartbeat echoing with the weight of choices resting heavily upon me. Though fear clung to me, curiosity and an overwhelming desire to free the boy clouded my judgment. I took a breath, contemplating what lay ahead. What if uncovering the truth allows all of you to finally be free? The words flowed from my lips, fueled by a relentless hope. Suddenly, the room filled with whirling energy, and the laughter erupted again, sharper and more overwhelming. The temperature dropped like a leaden weight, and before I could think, the shadows surged toward me, expanding as they formed a darker confluence of swirling mass. Caught between the figure's warning and the boyish plea, I made my choice. I will find him, I declared. I will help him. In that moment, I took a step toward the swirling shadows, trusting the locket to guide me. Stop! The figure screamed as a vortex of shadows encircled me, pulling me toward an unseen dimension. I felt the walls of the house flicker and dissolve around me, darkness closing in. Just before the pull consumed me, I shouted, "You have to let me try." Then everything went black and I found myself standing in a vast expanse filled with echoes of laughter and whispers from every corner. Memories flashed like projections through the black veil. I was back in the clearing, the boy in front of me again, bright and alive alongside the other children, just as I witnessed before. But this time I didn't hesitate. "Help me," the boy mouthed, a plea stretching across the divide that separated us. I reached out, clutching the locket tightly. My lungs filled with the warmth of light slanting through the trees as I stepped forward into the vivid moment. Ready to listen, ready to learn. And for a fleeting second, I felt connected to everything: the boyish laughter, the children's joy, and the weight of shadows, all woven into the fabric of time. But just as I absorbed it all, shuddering wind swept through, the world flickered, and the laughter abruptly dissipated. Then silence came again, the haunting kind. The clearing faded around me but left traces of what lingered beneath. The weight of secrets woven into Eldridge's legacy remained, and I opened my eyes, now standing alone back in Mrs. Carrington's house, the locket still clutched tightly in my palm. Part of me had slipped through time, touched the lives of those lost, but what had I truly unearthed? The door creaked open behind me, and Mrs. Carrington appeared, her face a mix of relief and fear. "You came back," she said, breathing heavily. "I think I found something," I replied, the echoes of laughter still buzzing within my mind. But as I glanced back toward the dim room, I couldn't shake the palpable sense that something still lingered, something connected to the boy and the unending secrets of Eldridge. I moved to the window, looking out onto the darkening town, feeling that history was still not finished with me yet. I didn't know what would come next, but deep down, I understood this was just the beginning.